Welcome in. It is the Fans College Football Podcast. Barrett, Sallee, and John Michaels with you. And John, it was an unbelievable week. Everybody's sort of pointing at Indiana. Are they a fraud? Are they for real? I think you got a little bit of a taste of that at Penn State with one of the best catches you'll ever see with Omar Cooper coming up big in the back of the end zone. But that is a Fernando Mendoza Heisman drive. I tell you what, look, I know Penn State's down, but going on the road in a place like that and getting kicked in the teeth and finding a way to come back, that tells me a lot about this Indiana team.
Yeah, it absolutely did. I mean, they were down not just at the end of the game, Barrett. They were battling pretty much the whole day from a deficit. I heard Curt Cignetti afterwards say, this is the first time they kind of got beat up front because they asked what was going on with Fernando Mendoza. And he said, we lost at the lines of scrimmage, which is something that Indiana prides itself on. When they went to Autzen Stadium earlier this year, I thought they dominated the lines of scrimmage against Oregon. They did not do so against Penn State. And for them, when you start to extrapolate that out about can they be a national title contender and sitting at number 2, that's what they're hoping for. You're not going to beat Ohio State. You're not going to beat Georgia. You're not going to beat Alabama if you can't win the lines of scrimmage. And for Indiana, that might have been a come to Jesus moment for Curt Cignetti and his guys. It's funny, and I know we'll spend some time talking Heisman. This might be the most nondescript Heisman race I've ever seen in my life. The fact that Fernando Mendoza may have had his moment in a game that he had less than 200 yards before the final drive kind of tells you where that's sitting right now.
Yeah, there's no superstar that has emerged yet, although it was an absolutely phenomenal performance. And look, if you're going, I'm not going to knock Indiana for playing this way against Penn State, because going on the road to Happy Valley, that's a big deal. And top tier teams do have that kind of game all the time. Look at Georgia going on the road and barely beating an Auburn team that didn't even know what offense was until last week. They fired Hugh Freeze, and suddenly they realized, hey, you know what? You got 2 all-star superstar receivers. Maybe get them the football. But I regress because that is still frustrating for me. But Indiana is a team right now. They've got the right coach at the right time with the right players on the lines of scrimmage you mentioned. And then for Fernando Mendoza and that rushing attack, they played well in that regard. And tight ends, I mean, it was a phenomenal performance from Indiana. Same can be said for Texas A&M. This is an A&M team that I think a lot of people still kind of assume they're going to be, that the pretender, not contender. Again, over and over and over again, Texas A&M consistently shows that they have everything it takes to be a national championship contender. And you look at this schedule from here on out for Texas A&M. They're sitting there at 9 wins. South Carolina, Samford, and Texas. Mm-hmm. To me, if you're Texas A&M, all you really need is one more win out of those 3. And obviously, at least one will be Samford. And you're already a lock to make the college football playoff because a 10-win SEC team's getting in.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that if you lose to a bad South Carolina team and then lose to Texas. I think if they beat South Carolina, they're in the playoffs, no matter what happens in the final game against Texas. Then the conversation comes up, Barrett, if you're Texas A&M. Do you want to be in the SEC championship game? Now, I get it. You get there, you have a chance to win it for the first time ever. You have a chance to have a bye and be the automatic qualifier and all of that. But, man, that's a lot of extra stress potentially playing Alabama in an SEC title game that at that point, if you're there, you've beaten South Carolina, and even just say you lost to Texas, you really don't have anything to play for other than playoff seeding, and that becomes one of those big dichotomies. I like them. I'll ask you a question, though, going as we do record this on a Monday, and the college football playoff rankings come out tomorrow. When it comes to those 2 teams, who now is number 2 behind Ohio State? Texas A&M, who had a much more impressive victory, or Indiana, who's been dominant for most of the year and struggled in Happy Valley?
I still think it's Indiana, and it's because a lot of coaches on that committee, the coaches on that committee recognize going to Penn State, that is really tough no matter how bad Penn State is. And then on top of that, going into that drive and having basically everything on the line, or at least in their minds, and doing what they did, that is, I think, enough to impress the coaches on the college football playoff committee. And if you go through that thing, the discussion is, I think, a little bit cursory because, yeah, they say they have all these metrics, but they really don't. They just kind of figure it out on the fly. But going on the road to, at Penn State is going to count for a lot. Now, could an argument be made for Texas A&M to be number 2? Absolutely, because doing what they've been doing essentially all year and having the best win in college football this year says a lot about what Texas A&M is.
Her best win?
Notre Dame.
Oh, wait, I heard that Notre Dame game didn't. Oh, never mind. That's just for Miami beating them by more points than Texas A&M did. Doesn't count.
It's still a good win. You know it's a good win.
It's a really good win. But my point to that was one team it's seen as a good win. The other team, it really doesn't count because hypothetically, if they were to play today, now suddenly Notre Dame would be better. Bring it. They didn't run for 100 yards against Miami.
Let me ask you this, because it's a perfect segue into what I was going to talk about. You mentioned how Texas A&M might not want to play in the SEC championship game. And it's a very good question. And I hate using precedent in the college football playoff committee era because they don't really care. They just make it up on the fly. But SMU had that same situation last year. They lost to Clemson, still made the college football playoff. So, I do think, in my mind, playing your way into a loss, which is essentially what you're doing. If you play your way into an SEC championship game and then lose, I don't think you can hold that against a team, especially because, again, coaches on the committee know what kind of grind it is. And I'm not saying the SEC, I'm just saying college football in general, that grind for a 12-week season and playing your way essentially into a loss. I don't see how you could punish a team for that. Now, I'm sure there are situations here or there where they'll find a way to do it, but I don't think it'll happen, especially in the SEC.
Right. And the committee said last year they were not going to hold losses in championship games against teams. Like they said last year, going into the ACC, that SMU, if they lost, wasn't going to be eliminated. Like Alabama and Miami last year, because neither one of them had other data points, weren't going to be able to jump into the postseason. So basically, for me, for Texas A&M, it wouldn't be about, hey, maybe you lose whatever. You're not going to be eliminated from the college football playoffs. More was, do you want to go through the grind of another game against Alabama? Sure. Much like SMU, though, my answer is, yeah, you want to play it because you haven't won the conference. You want to think about what it would be like at Kyle Field to hang that banner that you're conference champions. You know how excited they would be for that? They're used to having 4 losses by now, so hell yeah, they want to be in the SEC title game.
Yeah. And, I think in the playoff era, like a lot of fans only focus on the playoff and a lot of media members do too. And I think that, to me, that's not why I love college football. I love college football because of the pageantry, because of how much every game wins, because of the rivalry. Like that, to me, almost when I was a kid, was secondary. The playoff was kind of secondary. The national championship was kind of secondary. I just want to see, what this means to everybody. Like, for instance, like you're Miami, Florida State. When I was in my teens, that was it, man. That was everything. I grew up in the Iron Bowl. It didn't matter if any of those teams, either one of those teams won the national championship. You want to win those 60 minutes. And so I think for teams that are, like you mentioned, A&M hanging that conference championship banner, that matters. Yeah, after the SEC championship game, after the ACC championship game, there might be something in your future. But every single college coach goes into the season saying, we control that. Right. What after beyond that, you're looking at a bunch of players or coaches, you're looking at a bunch of computers, you're looking at whatever, but you can point to a conference championship in August as your goal. And that is the focus for all of these teams. So I'm with you. A lot of conversation always is going to happen and is going to continue to happen. Do you really want to play in a conference championship game? Absolutely you do, because I want that ring. All these players want that ring, and you get one if you win a conference championship.
Absolutely. And you get bragging rights and recruiting and maybe NIL and transfer portal and everything else that comes along with that in today's day and age. It's funny you talk about pageantry. Like, I'm still with you. The regular season games, to me, whether my team's in it or out of it, and luckily they're still kind of on the fringe. Dude, I flew to Miami this week to see us play 5-loss, 6-loss Syracuse. You know why I go? Because you get a chance to see college football live. And how many times do you get a chance to see that on a regular basis during the year? Maybe if you live in the city where your team plays, maybe 7 or 8 times. Like, I know you went down and saw Auburn play a couple of weeks ago. It's just a part of this game having the meaning it does. I'd 100 times out of 100 rather go to a college football game than a stale, boring-ass NFL game. The NFL has become boring. It's become corporate. College football, there's something about we all put on the same colors. We're going to tailgate beforehand. We're going to do the stupid cheers that we do, and we're going to absolutely love it.
It's 100% accurate. And unfortunately, I think in this day and age, and probably because of the network that owns the rights to the college football playoff, it does seem like the focus is solely on that. And we've kind of lost sight on what had made the sport great for so long. Before we get into next week, Oregon and Iowa, I'm not going to hold that against Oregon at all. Cold, rainy, ugly. I think for Oregon, actually, that's something you can use to your advantage. You want to have that experience because you don't know where you're going to play moving forward. So an Oregon team that is going to put that behind them now. Kinnick's a tough place to play. Dante Moore still going through this for his first year for the first time. That matters. That matters a lot to me. So I don't really care that it was close. Look, I know Herbie picked Iowa to win. There are a lot of folks that were in that court as well. Congratulations to Oregon. That is a big win, and that's something you can hang your hat on, and huge for the Big Ten championship race too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're still alive in that, but the 3 games they've played against teams that are physical, I realize Oregon's not as good as we thought they were. They go to Penn State and they blow a late lead and they end up winning in overtime because Drew Aller turned into Drew Aller. You play Indiana punched you in the face and push you around. And Iowa did a lot the same. Now, much like we said for Fernando Mendoza, great final drive for Dante Moore to get him in position to kick a field goal. But I don't trust them in a postseason. I think they're good enough to be a playoff team. I think they still have USC and Washington on the schedule. They should beat both of them because those are more finesse Pac-12 type teams. And if they do so, Oregon's going to get in the college football playoff. But I don't think if Oregon gets in there, I'm picking them more than one round, and it could be matchup associated. They play somebody out of the SEC, a big physical team. I could see Oregon getting run out of there. They're not as good as they were in the past couple of years, and I don't trust them. And those games, like against Iowa, show me why I don't trust them.
But you know who loved that game is Dan Lanning, because now Dan Lanning can go into that this week and use every curse word you could possibly imagine, hurl every insult you could possibly imagine at his own team. And that, to me, is what a great coach should do, what he will do, and maybe that does elevate Oregon to that point, because I do think they can get there, but they're not there yet. I mean, you're 100% right. Garrett Nussmeier is also not there, as in he might not be there on the top of the depth chart moving forward. Got benched in favor of Michael Van Buren. Look, I was wrong about Garrett Nussmeier. I picked him to win the Heisman Trophy. I bought into the hype, and I apologize to everybody out there because I'm dumb and all of you are smart. This is a guy, and look, I know there's this idea that, okay, maybe they got Michael Van Buren, who started at Mississippi State last year, because they felt that Garrett Nussmeier might struggle. Look, we saw in that documentary how much Brian Kelly wanted to keep Garrett Nussmeier in Baton Rouge. Trace Armstrong's his agent. They both were both of theirs agent. They were going back and forth trying to keep Garrett in Baton Rouge. Look, this is another example of, I think, LSU and Brian Kelly, the culture that they had just led to a disconnect among the entire team, but specifically that offense, because you saw Garrett Nussmeier on the sideline. He didn't even really care, and that was still a 1-score game at that point. So, and look, LSU, the offense has been a disaster this year. It's not going to change with Michael Van Buren. He was okay and serviceable, I guess, at Mississippi State last year. With this LSU offense, it's not going to change all that much because, yeah, they're more talented, but this team is a team that has 105 players going in 105 different directions. And that's because of Brian Kelly. That's not necessarily because of anybody else. So look, LSU had a chance against Bama. That's a problem for Alabama. There's no doubt. But Garrett Nussmeier, I think, will go down as one of the biggest busts this year.
There are a litany of busts in quarterback. I think back to when we were reading Phil Steele and the Athlon Sports and going through all of the different iterations of preseason and how badly people missed on all of these quarterbacks. Garrett Nussmeier was there. DJ Lagway got benched this weekend because Florida got boat raced by Kentucky. I saw many people picked him as the Heisman winner. He's been awful, and I don't think he's in Florida next year. That's just my thought. Drew Aller was not having a good year before he got hurt. Cade Klubnik has not been good, and I know he was hurt some as well. Arch Manning was super overhyped. Lenore Sellers has not lived up to it. Stop me if you've heard this before. That's 6 quarterbacks we were told that we're going to run college football, and not a single one of them is having a good year. I know Arch Manning sort of had a renaissance in the fourth quarter against Mississippi State, and they had a good first 3 quarters against Vanderbilt. Good for them. I think Texas is the most overranked team in the entire top 25. They should not be inside the top 10. When you look at, they got blasted by Florida. They need a miracle against Mississippi State to come back and win. They're not a good football team. And guess what? They'll be out of the college football playoffs when Saturday's all said and done.
I noticed you didn't mention Carson Beck as an overrated quarterback.
But nobody had him the same ranking that they had all these other guys.
I don't know. Some people did. I didn't. I certainly didn't. But
he's had a solid year. He's had 2 bad games. Louisville was awful. And then really SMU, he wasn't bad either. He had 1 bad throw in overtime.
But I think it goes to your point. I mean, Francisco Mendoza having a Heisman moment on the road against Penn State on a fantastic drive. But in previous years, that would have been like, I think the reaction would have been, oh, that's awesome. Good for him. You know, he can lead Indiana to something more. That's great. But now it's like, well, who the hell else is going to win the Heisman? Right.
And that's where
I have a Heisman vote and I'm looking around going, damn, I have no clue.
Statistically, Julian Sainz had a really good year. 24 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Yeah. But he feels.
But even that's not superstar type stuff, considering what we've seen in the past.
He feels like a game manager, which at Ohio State is probably all you have to be with all those weapons. Ty Simpson's had a pretty good year, but he's had moments where he's looked completely lost at quarterback. So to the point of that, it's very nondescript. It's probably going to be one of the 3 of those guys, unless somebody comes out of nowhere in this last month of the season and goes crazy. And it sucks for somebody like Haynes King, who actually has probably been more important to his team than anybody else, but his defense let him down 2 weeks ago. And playing in the ACC, you have to be undefeated to be at the top of the Heisman list.
Yeah, like when I fill out mine, I kind of weigh value as part of it. Like last year, I voted for Ashton Genty. They made it to the playoff, and without him, they wouldn't have sniffed the playoff. And I know Travis Hunter won it, but Colorado, like whatever. I think we all know what kind of mess that was. Now, he was the best player in terms of the draft and all that other stuff. He was the most athletic player, whatever. But value does matter to me, and you're right. Haynes King, without him, Georgia Tech is nowhere close to what it is. Well, you know what? We haven't seen Philo. I wouldn't say nowhere close, but he has been the catalyst for that team. There's no doubt. You mentioned Ty Simpson and a big game this weekend, a revenge game against Oklahoma for the Crimson Tide. Ty Simpson, 4 straight games without an interception. He only has 1 on the season, but that Bama rushing attack, it has me concerned. Only 2.5 yards per carry against LSU. Now, LSU's defense has been okay. I get that. But that's a little concerning because that Bama offensive line, it's had its moments where it looks great and it has its moments where it looks awful, and there's really nothing in between. So this, to me, an Oklahoma defense that has been pretty solid all year long. Can the Oklahoma offense keep Alabama in this game? Because look, John Mateer, another quarterback's overrated going into the season. John Mateer is another one, but they still play great defense at Oklahoma. Run defense, especially 2.5 yards per carry. This screams ugly. This screams sloppy. But to me, it also screams late cover for Alabama. It's a 6.5 point spread. I think in the end, it's going to be a battle of quarterbacks and who can make a play. That's it. A single play. And certainly Ty Simpson is that guy this year. John Mateer is not. So I'll take the Crimson Tide to win, cover. But man, this is going to be ugly.
Yeah, Alabama has proven a lot this year that they can handle, outside of the Florida State game, they can handle tough situations. They had no business beating South Carolina. All Lenora Sellers has to do probably is hang on to the ball, and they go on to win. And Alabama might not be in the college football playoff conversation with a second loss. They showed this week against LSU they could win it ugly. They showed at Georgia when they needed to make plays, they could go down the field and make plays. I just look at their weaponry compared to Oklahoma. When you talk about Jeremy Bernard and obviously Ryan Williams, I know Jam Miller hasn't had the greatest game or the greatest season for them. I look at their weapons and I feel like Mateer, when they play upper echelon teams, has looked like a Pac-12 quarterback. He's had moments where he's been really good. And I know the Texas game, he probably rushed back to be there a week too early, but he wasn't good. Threw a couple of picks and lost the game, or else Texas would have been out of it. Oklahoma would have a really good shot. I think Oklahoma gets eliminated this week. When they lose to Alabama, they fall to 3 losses. They're going to fall way down in the pecking order, and they're probably going to be out of the playoffs.
A lot of people in our neck of the woods are upset that College Game Day is going to Pitt for Pitt Notre Dame instead of Texas and Georgia. But look, Pitt is one of those teams where you kind of look around and say, okay, They're on the periphery. Now Virginia's out. What's going to happen with the Pitt Panthers? Again, a win against Notre Dame would be huge for their playoff hopes. Mason Heinchel, a guy that came in 4 games into the season. Eli Holstein was great last year early. He gets benched. And this kid has been really, really good for a team that really hasn't had a history of great wide receivers over the last 5-6 years. Used to, when Larry Fitzgerald and those dudes were there, but not lately. But Heinchel's gone over 304 of his last 5 starts. This is a different team, a different Pitt team. Now that he is in there and Chandler Morris is out, to me, I still trust Notre Dame. Jeremiah, I'm old enough to remember in game 1, and I know you are too, when we were all wondering, where the hell's Jeremiah Love? Does he still exist? Well, yeah, he does. And he's been really, really good lately. To me, I think Notre Dame's going to go in to Pitt and just try to be as conservative as possible. Do not let Pitt get going offensively. It's going to be an ugly game again. Because of that, I'm going to take the 10.5 with Pitt, but I don't think this game's it's not going to look close. I think it will be close, at least in terms of the scoreboard, but it's not going to really be close.
Here's what's crazy. Pitt controls 4 teams' college football playoff destiny. Their own, Notre Dame this week. Then they come to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. Then they host Miami, the final game of the year. They could either, if Pitt runs the table, they're in the playoffs. They're in the ACC championship game. I think they'd have a rematch against Georgia Tech in that situation. If they lose to Notre Dame, obviously their playoffs are out. It really strengthens Notre Dame's hopes to try to get in there. If they beat Georgia Tech, they could potentially eliminate the Yellow Jackets from the ACC championship and a chance in an auto bid. And Miami, I think this week will probably be somewhere 14, 15, 16 in the rankings. They could put a monkey wrench in Miami. 7 years ago, had a chance to be undefeated in the ACC title game and lost to Kenny Pickett and Pitt on the final game of the year up in Pittsburgh. You're right about Mason Heinchel. He's got a little wild card, a little Johnny Manziel in him, not off the field with all the extracurriculars on the field. It's making plays. It's sometimes going, what the hell are you doing? And then getting wild because the kid's fantastic. My biggest thing is defensively, can they slow down Notre Dame's rushing attack? After Notre Dame played against a Corey Heatherman defense and Jadarian Price and Jordan Love were missing in action against Miami, they've been able to run the ball. If they can run the ball, they make it easy for CJ Carr. He's going to throw 15 to 25 passes. That's it. If Pitt can slow the run down, I think they can upset Notre Dame. The problem is I don't think they can slow the run down enough. Pitt gets eliminated. Notre Dame probably moves to number 2 because they're going to the gold helmets.
They do like to do that. All right, finishing up right down the street from where we work, Georgia and Texas. This game was pointed to all year long last year as one of the biggest games of the season. And certainly it was. But Georgia, the knock on Georgia all year long has been, slow starts offensively. They just can't get going. That did not happen in Starkville because defensively, Glenn Schumann got his face punched when Mississippi State got the ball. But after that, it was absolutely over. Georgia, Nate Frazier getting the ball again. Chauncey Bowens, not necessarily the focal point. Nate Frazier looked like an absolute star, the star that I think a lot of us expected to see first game of his freshman career last year. So to me, this is a Georgia team that's, in Athens, they are really, really tough to beat. But you mentioned Arch Manning earlier in the show. Arch Manning had essentially a good game and maybe a half of another one. I just can't buy in to Arch Manning as any kind of weapon. And then on top of that, I think there's this too much of a focus on Arch Manning, but they can't run the football. Texas has really struggled running the football all year long. And so to me, that's been a big part of Arch's struggles. And if that's not gonna change, especially in a place like Sanford Stadium. So give me the Bulldogs, give them to me by double digits. I don't think this one's close.
Like I said, people tend to forget, because the college football playoff rankings have told us that Texas is a good team, that this team went to the swamp and got boat raced by Florida. Florida punched them in the mouth and took advantage of them. They were down double digits to Mississippi State, who is a very bottom tier SEC team, in the fourth quarter. And then they got hot. Jeff Lebby didn't know what to do, trying to coach his way out of it. They end up winning that. They're going to go against a revved up Georgia team. It's a night game at Sanford. I know they lost once there this year. They've lost twice in the last 7 years at Sanford Stadium. Once to Alabama, once to South Carolina back in 2019. They're not losing twice in one season at home. Texas is eliminated from the college football playoffs coming up on Saturday evening. I think Georgia wins. I think it'll be fairly close. I think Texas is going to do everything they can to be around, but it's going to be 3-for-3 Georgia over Texas in the last calendar year.
Yeah, I can't buy into Texas. I've never been able to buy into Texas this year. The Arch Manning stuff, of all the quarterbacks we talked about before the season, and we mentioned earlier in the show how many of them have failed and fallen off the face of the earth. Arch Manning never even deserved that. And so I think because of him, this Texas team is going to be looked at as one of the biggest failures and one of the most overrated teams of the season. And I never understood it to begin with. So we'll see what happens against Georgia, but I don't think he can handle what's going to be coming his way in Sanford Stadium. And plus he can't get a rushing attack to help him out anyway. So, but it'll be a fun one. There's no doubt. I mean, Texas going to Georgia, a lot of Georgia fans haven't seen that. So it'll be fun, no doubt, in the Classic City. All right. This has been the Fans College Football Podcast. He's John Michaels. I'm Barrett Sallee. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Share the show with everybody that you know, and we'll be back next week.